Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm pleased to see everybody here. It's a great pleasure to come here to Portugal and present this. I think when Mr. President, was doing the introduction of me earlier on, he reminded me I've been in this telecoms business for around 20 years. Strangely enough, one of the sort of great pleasures I had nearly 20 years ago, probably coming to Portugal and addressing a similar audience in Portugal about technology and the trends at the time, and I think at that time it was ISDN. And I know I hadn't done many presentations at that time, but I'm glad to say that 20 years later I'm still able to come and talk about technology a little bit. The only difference is I'm sort of, as I say, 20 years and a number of grey hairs and 3 children later. and how many more presentations and addresses. So this morning I just really want to sort of talk through a little bit about the cloud journey, some of the technology sort of trends, without going deep into technology, some of the things that we see sort of going on in the market, and some of those sort of little trends, and bring perhaps a little bit of a different perspective. So I sort of want to talk through some of the latest innovations in technology, sort of how do we link a couple of the buzzwords of sort of SDN and NFV into this cloud discussion and debate. What's that all about? Look at the sort of a couple of new service and applications that we have to try and address, and sort of talk through sort of what service providers themselves are going through as a challenge. So one of the things, I'm not sure if anybody I'm sure you've all sort of jumped in a car with the children and you've got into that car journey, and 5 minutes into it, the children turn around and say, are we nearly there yet? It's one of those, it's like, we know we're going on a journey. I think certainly from a children's perspective, they're all the excitement, the hype and the buzz about going on that journey. But we're not quite sure how long it's going to take there. I think if we look at this digital sort of journey, as I said, I was 20 years ago talking about ISDN, we talk about the change to the digital economy. We actually don't know how far down that journey we are right now. What we do know is there's an awful lot of things we don't know. We know when we look to cloud and digital economy, it's going to be big. There's an awful lot of growth there. And we're probably, are we halfway through that journey to digital economy? Are we quarter way through? We actually really don't know. That's part of the excitement and part of the challenge and opportunity. But for sure, I think, there are some big numbers in here. Number of connected people, the growth in traffic. The next 3-4 years is going to be challenging for all of us to accommodate and manage the growth. To challenge the business models that we operate in, and to accommodate and manage that, and as new competitors and competition come in, to actually react and adjust to that changing competition. I think that's part of the excitement, part of the challenge and the opportunity. But there are a few things that we can do and do know, and that's what I want to talk a little bit about. So I think fundamentally, if we look at cloud, it is changing the way we consume services and products. Previously, and I remember, it's probably only 5-10 years ago, talking, actually I think it was in Turkey, to a Turkish service provider, and saying about telecom services and what they go on, and they're talking about the need to sort of get proactive in selling services and making those services appeal. And at the time, the customer sort of said, well, actually, we don't have salespeople because there is only one product. They have to use that product, so why do we need salespeople? I think in cloud, perhaps we don't need salespeople because now we're much more enlightened consumers. And we actually now go and say, we will go and find the services that we want as consumers. We expect that product to be available through a service catalogue. We want to go and configure and manage that product, that service, collect it, bundle it in the way we want it. So we expect those services to be delivered in a package. And I think there's a good example of where we're being challenged in this space with the likes of Amazon Web Services. In terms of a service catalogue, if I want some compute power, or I want some storage, or even now if I want some networking, I can go to Amazon Web Services and I can actually order that, click through a few things, configure the compute I want, the configuration I want, get it downloaded, put my credit card details in, and I get the compute exactly as I want it when I want it. So, and that's available pretty much instantly as compute capacity. So I think we've sort of seen this shift, and this is the shift we're challenged with, going from I'll order it, I'll wait 10 days, perhaps it's 3 weeks, perhaps it's 3 months, and eventually that service will get delivered. I think now, actually, we're all there with Google searching, trying to find, actually, you can't deliver it in time, I'll go somewhere else, and I really want it. So I think, the consumer expectation with cloud is very much shifting to this on-demand personalised service, and in particular, ordering through a service catalogue. That actually presents, I think, to the IT team and the IT directors, managers, provides you some real challenges in what and how you offer your services. Again, I'm probably one of our Alcatel-Lucent's IT directors' sort of biggest nightmares, because wherever they put policies in place, I try and go and break those policies. I really want to use things, drive the business faster. So where I'm told I've got to use a PC, actually no, I bring my own device and I use my Apple Mac, which is actually not company standard. Where I'm meant to use an instant messaging system called Link, actually that doesn't do what I want to do for communication, so I'll go and bring my own. So me as a marketing guy trying to break the IT policy rules, as is I think many other people in many other organisations. But also I think we're sort of really seeing in the cloud world a couple of other big things. It's actually changing, and there's a couple of key things we're seeing now. A term that I've heard is bring your own cloud. Really, where as large enterprises, banks or whatever, I think the need for yourself to move your business forward is so great that actually you're bringing and moving to this agile development, DevOps environment, develop and operationalize services and applications very quickly. As you move to these DevOps, you sort of recruit, bring in contractors who are experienced in this sort of agile environment. And what do they want to do? They want to come in, they're a contractor, they want to have an instant impact. They really don't want to work in your cloud environment. They bring their own cloud. So what we're seeing is contractors, developers who are doing new applications and services actually saying, well, I know I've got an Amazon Web Service compute environment. I can set that up, I can configure it exactly what I want it. So I need that. So what we see in this sort of new world is this bring your own cloud, where actually contractors saying, here is the cloud environment. It's got this sort of virtualization software, this sort of VM. That's exactly what they're bringing. That, of course, creates some challenges on the security policies. How do you manage? Is it a secure link? Is it a dedicated link? Should you have encrypted traffic? What are the policies around access to that? So, and I think also sort of we now need to say, okay, well, how do we bring in? We want to develop in that environment, but once we've done the development in, say, that public cloud environment, to bring that traffic for exactly, we were just hearing now for the regulatory reasons, we want to make sure if we're holding customer personal records, we can't keep that in a public environment, we've got to bring that into a private cloud environment. So we do the development in a public environment, but we need to migrate that into our own private cloud environment, sitting in our own data storage facilities which we own and operate as an enterprise. So managing that agility of moving load from open cloud, public cloud, into private cloud. There's also sort of a number of examples where operators are trying to, service providers, enterprises are trying to say, actually, there are some tasks that I can put on a public compute machine. The cost of doing and using public compute, public storage, is much smaller than doing it in my own. So there are some tasks, whether it be a workflow task or something else where I'm not holding customer records and data, that can be done outside. But I need to bring those two together. So we're sort of moving into this, being forced to move into this world of hybrid cloud, where private and public are coming and joining together and have to be joined together And that has to be done securely. From a service provider perspective, this is also providing some real challenges from the service provider, who's obviously got some key assets in the network and is used to actually doing testing and building services and assuring the delivery of those services, guaranteeing latency, delay, and high value for voice services. They've got this sort of access network that has to be managed, and they've got a certain legal obligation to provide sort of access to rural areas. And so they've got this sort of high-speed access network, which is a strong asset. And a network infrastructure that also has a high cost and has to be managed. But at the same time, sort of historically, always taken the approach that actually to deliver a service, I really need to build, test, operate, and then productize that service. On the other side, the new over-the-top providers, the Amazons, the Windows, Azure, and Googles, come from a different approach. Is actually build something, make it available, let the user test it out, get the feedback, change it, modify it, and sort of move much more agile, much faster. But of course, they don't have the burdens of the network infrastructure. But their spend instead is going into the data center, where they've invested very, very heavily in large data centers, whereas obviously the telco service providers invented in the network. The challenge, I think, is how do we sort of bring these two worlds together, and I'll talk in a minute about how and what are service providers learning and trying to bring across as technologies into their world to try and help bring more agile services. But I think it's also sort of worth looking elsewhere, because this challenge and debate has been going on, I think, right now in the retail sector. And I apologise, these are slightly perhaps UK-centric slides and positions. But if we actually look at the UK or into the sort of supermarket business and consumer goods in particular, being really challenged. I think we've seen a lot of new entrants come into that sort of market space, like the Walmart from the US and Aldi and a lot of other sort of lower cost supermarkets have entered the traditional grounds of what I would say is sort of high value people, whether it be Sainsbury's, Waitrose, Tesco's, or whatever. But at the end of the day, as a consumer, I want to buy a certain number of branded goods. I want to buy, whether it be my Kellogg's cornflakes, my oranges, or whatever it is. There's a certain basket of goods I want to buy. It just so happens that actually I can go conveniently to one big supermarket, walk through and get everything I want in a very short space of time. And then that supermarket, but actually what makes me decide which supermarket to go to is really then a challenge and a battle. How do those supermarkets make it most convenient? But I think also the price pressures meant the actual margin in that supermarket has been slimmed down. But the efficiency and the gain, and how do we make those recommendations, how do we position those goods, how do we make that thing more appealing? There's a couple of things going on in the supermarkets that we have to learn from. One is the analytics, the customer loyalty cards that they introduce, to then do a huge amount of big data and big analytics to actually understand what is the consumer's buying behaviour. So I think, behind all this is this massive sort of database of customer knowledge, customer awareness, sort of work through. That is actually then also used to drive the distribution chain, because a critical part of improving margins in the supermarket chain is actually you cannot have any efficiency or a lack of efficiency in your distribution chain. If you're really going to make low margin, sort of manage to survive on the lowest margin, you need to improve your distribution chain. If we actually think about the telco world and the world we live in, the customers have those services and products, whether it be a compute service, a voice service, a video service. To improve our margin, we need to make sure that distribution chain is efficient as possible. That may mean, in the case of the supermarkets, tying up with partnerships with haulage companies Eddie Stobart in the UK is a big national distribution company. They happen to have a very close relationship with Tesco's as the supermarket because the logistics investment is made by the haulage company, not the supermarket. And in our world, distribution is our networks. It's building efficiency in our network, and that's what we're about. The other thing that sort of the supermarket's done is convenience delivered to the door. So it's about really how do we tailor and build, and that's exactly what the supermarkets have done to allow online purchasing and cloud-based purchasing, actually develop their own distribution, local distribution with their own boxes and their own logistics software. So again, long-scale sort of distribution to the stores done efficiently through a logistics company and then translated as well into their own local distribution. So, but it really is about distribution, which is, from a telco service provider world, that's the networks that we do. How do we build efficiency into our networks? So, I think we've sort of left with really two questions. Two questions here is, we're moving to a marketplace, to this sort of cloud marketplace, the self-service portal for SMEs. We're starting to see that on the compute side of things, and say Amazon and Google and others allowing us to buy compute and storage as and where we want it, when we want it. But then how efficient is that distribution network to enable the delivery? Because payment for that delivery is not direct perhaps, but we have to actually improve that. And as we saw sort of, and I think heard from the water company example as well, actually we're in the utility game. If we're in providing telco services, it's a utility game. Utility isn't a bad place to be so long as we can get the economics right. But the other thing, the assets that we have, is what about the communication services? Whilst cloud compute IT has moved forward, perhaps the communications haven't. If we look to compute and what goes on there, again, what's gone on there is compute is available, it's virtualized, it's available in minutes, but the network, unfortunately, is only partially virtualized. It takes days and weeks for us to get that network configured, enabled. If we actually look about how we go through the network configuration, we've got a LAN piece segment to do, we've got a wide area segment to do, we've got all sorts of firewall configurations and IP addresses to allocate. So even in that data center environment, the network within the data center is still quite manually configurable, whereas the compute, the automation to create that compute has been virtualized in an available second. This is really where sort of, this is where we see sort of starting the software-defined networking, SDN, coming in to enable this, to enable and bring templates and workflows to these data center networks. In our case, in Alcatel-Lucent, we sort of set up a startup a couple of years ago called New Arch Networks, completely look at how we do networks to make it much more agile, to bring some agility into this data center, to make it as quick and as agile and remove one barrier for this. So again, when we're building large-scale databases, large-scale data centers, and are making that data center capability as flexible as it needs to be to make it scalable, we know that we need to apply a template service with policies so we can allow instant sort of networking, not just within the data center, but this actually has to apply straight over from the data center into the wide area and the WAN connection as well. So that when we've got this new DevOps guy, so the contractor coming in to do some development, he wants to put his cloud compute, he wants to bring in Amazon Web Services, we need to sort of put a control, security sort of ACL control list in place to allow him to go access to that, but we put the security compliance around it. That has to be done as a template to say, okay, that user, that IP subnet can have access to that service in this way. That mustn't be a manual configuration, that must be done as a templated service to provide and set up the security zones. So I think if we look at SDN, we're pretty much addressing that network challenge of where and what's going on in the data center. So, we're removing that networking hindrance both within the data center, but also going out to VPN services across the wide area. So that will allow us to sort of bring together, I think, some sort of integration between the private cloud and public cloud. So we're sort of looking at SDN to address this sort of hybrid cloud development. One integrated cloud, created in minutes, managed as one, looking at the assets from a public network and bringing them together with our own private. Applying the security rules and the logic as to what data can be hosted where, because that's one of the critical parts now, I think, as we move forward, as we just heard. It's like, you need to be restricted where you put your customer information. And that has to be done with sort of complete flexibility to help build the efficiency of the network, because we cannot have any inefficiencies. Because I think the other thing the network does in terms of efficiency, if we can make the network flexible, it means we can efficiently place the network function or the virtual machine wherever we want it, wherever it makes sense. So we can take that application running on a virtual machine in a data center, and provided that network is fully flexible underneath, we can move that there and the network reconfigures. And that again is the whole drive and where we're at in software-defined networking and SDN. The other thing that's going on here is sort of network function virtualization, and we're moving sort of, again, applying, so carriers themselves in terms of trying to build efficiency, the service provider looking to say, how do I bring cloud technologies, cloud techniques, and put the functions that I typically have, whether it be my voice communications functions or my mobile sort of gateway functions, how do I take those functions and move them into a standard commercial off-the-shelf server, COTS server, on standard hardware. So virtualizing those telco functions, breaking away from the dedicated machines that are there today, and then having sort of building flexibility. So this is what we call network function virtualization. So it's the telcos adopting cloud technologies to bring agility, simplicity, and cost efficiency into their business. So what does that really do? So if we combine things like IMS, which is the IP multimedia system we've deployed for mobile, voice in mobile networks, voice in sort of next generation voice services within the telco. Starts bringing together voice over IP, enabling voice breakout in an IP world, packet voice, that sort of thing. It's a scalable communications foundation, is this IMS. It actually has been around for quite a number of years, but has been quite cost prohibitive in terms of its function is quite dedicated to virtual machines. But if we can bring that, open it up with new network APIs, allowing service catalog creation. So we sort of create what we call new conversation APIs, which is an API that IT people can integrate and build into. We create what we call WebRTC, which is where we can embed voice communication links in web sort of services and into our internet. So we can now actually very quickly and easily allow the integration of voice links and sort of communication links straight into a web page with a simple sort of URL. It means we're sort of bringing together the traditional communication services, telco world, and the service catalog and the web world, data world, and bringing those together. So it allows us to sort of effectively as well sort of opens up the possibility for an integrator or the service providers to start coming up with any number of different new services, whether it be being able to share live video, sharing between devices. Again, we use the IP media system, the networking piece, to then link and move across a video stream from one device to the other. Click for live video call, again, being on the web screen, just clicking to automatically pick up a live video call. Or bringing together communicating friends and family as a plan. So it's actually allowing us, with assurance, with some guarantees that we've got used to in the telco sort of service provider world, in the communication services we're used to, matching that up in an open way. It's only possible because of the openness of adopting cloud-type technologies and APIs. But I think finally, sort of really, as we're challenged in this new world, we're seeing new things. It's interesting, we talked earlier, just sort of heard previously about standardization and what goes on. Interestingly, in this new world, in the cloud world, standards are less relevant. Historically, in the telco world, we defined standards, we got people together, worked through the standards, and then eventually we got to a product. in this new open world where everything is open and we're trying to contribute open source code, we need to speed up the development. The view is actually the standard is defined after we've created the service. So we sort of create an alliance, we contribute our source code into an open source community. Everybody can see that, use that code, integrate that out, develop it, and move forward. And that's really what OpenStack is, a fundamental sort of open source code environment where the code is developed openly, made available for everybody, and then the standards will be coming as a result after that. But also we'll other see sort of, other collaborations in this new world as well. We have an ecosystem for this migration to NFV. We've currently got about 40 partners in this ecosystem working together to help build the efficiency of these telco networks. And then also service providers themselves, the sort of, the cloud team alliance between sharing experiences between service providers on a global basis, just to make sure we can all move first. So I think as we're challenged in this world, we also have to challenge ourselves to be open thinking, sharing experiences, knowledge between competitors and also between customers, which is an interesting and sometimes sort of scary concept. So I think for the cloud to realise its value, we're going to see some of these got to be faster. We've got to worry about the security, fully integrated, but it's going to be openness to get that sort of cross-industry collaboration to move that forward. We've got to have the versatility, build the efficiency in this distribution chain, being creative, versatile. That will allow us to sort of, rapid service creation and premiums and really unlocking the true value. I think, as I say right at the start, where are we on this journey to cloud? We're actually only just at the start. There's lots of new opportunities and potentials coming out. We're going to be all challenged on a daily basis, which is actually, that's a good thing. Keeping our mind alert will make sure that it may make us look older, but I think internally we'll feel much younger if we keep challenging ourselves. So that's really a quick run through, a snapshot of where I could sort of see it, and I'll be around for the rest of the day to have conversations with you afterwards. Thank you very much.